Little Red Riding Hood, published by Platt and Monk Company, Incorporated. Red Riding Hood. Red Riding Hood is shaking hands. The wolf leans against a tree. He looks at her, sticks out his tongue, and smiles most happily. Red Riding Hood wears her new cape. She feels most nearly grown, to take a long walk through the woods to grandmother's all alone. Little Red Riding Hood. There was once a sweet little girl who had no brothers or sisters. She lived with her father and mother in a pretty little cottage at the edge of the village. Everybody loved this little girl. Her grandmother, perhaps, loved her the most of all, and gave her a great many pretty things. Once she gave her a red cloak with a hood, which she always wore afterwards, so people called her Little Red Riding Hood. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Put on your things and go to see your grandmother. She has been ill. Take this basket to her. I have put in it eggs, butter, and cake, and other dainties. Now, Red Riding Hood, do not run or you will break the eggs. But you must not waste time on the way." Then, kissing her good-bye, she started Red Riding Hood off. Little Red Riding Hood loved to visit her grandmother's cottage, because to get there she had to go through the woods. It was a bright and sunny morning. Red Riding Hood was so happy that at first she wanted to dance. She remembered, however, what her mother had said about the basket having the eggs, so she walked with great care. Soon her steps grew slower and slower. There were so many things to listen to. There was a little brook, there was the song of the birds, and the hum of the bees, and far away there was the sound of her father's axe as he cut the branches from the trees. There were so many things to watch. There were the little squirrels jumping from branch to branch, the rabbits nibbling the tender ferns, and in the distance the blue smoke from her grandmother's cottage. All around her she saw pretty wild flowers which she loved, and she stopped to pick a bunch of them for her grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood wandered from the path and was stooping to pick a flower when from behind her a gruff voice said, "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood." Little Red Riding Hood turned around and saw a great big wolf, but as she did not know what a wicked beast the wolf was, she replied, "Good morning, Mr. Wolf." "What have you in that basket, Little Red Riding Hood?" "Eggs and butter and cake, Mr. Wolf." "Where are you going with them, Little Red Riding Hood?" "I am going to my old grandmother, who is ill, Mr. Wolf." "Where does your old grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" "Along that path, past the wild rose bushes, then through the gate at the end of the wood, Mr. Wolf." Then Mr. Wolf said, "Good morning," and started off through the wood. Little Red Riding Hood continued her search for flowers for her grandmother. "Now," thought Mr. Wolf as he trotted along, "that little girl will taste very sweet. It is a good plan to keep her to the end. I shall eat up the old grandmother first." On he went, and at last he reached the porch covered with flowers and knocked at the cottage door. "Who is there?" called the grandmother. "Little Red Riding Hood," said the wicked wolf. "Press the latch, open the door, and walk in," said the grandmother. The wolf pressed the latch upon the door and walked in where the grandmother lay ill in bed. She was dreadfully frightened, as you can imagine, when she saw it was a wolf instead of her grandchild. The wolf did not give her much time to wonder. He was about to spring upon her when she hastened into a clothes closet that was by the side of her bed and closed the door. When Mr. Wolf found he had lost a good dinner, he put on grandmother's nightcap, which she had dropped in her haste, and then crept into bed and under the bedclothes. In a short while Little Red Riding Hood reached her grandmother's cottage. She knocked at the door and walked in, saying, "Good morning, grandmother. I have brought you fresh eggs and butter and cake from mother, and here is a bunch of flowers I gathered in the wood. Dear grandmother, I hope you are feeling much better." And as she came nearer to the bed, she said, "What big ears you have, grandmother!" "All the better to hear you with, my dear." "What big eyes you have, grandmother!" "All the better to see you with, my dear." "But, grandmother, what a big nose you have!" "All the better to smell with, my dear." "And what big teeth you have, grandmother." "All the better to eat you up with, my dear." And as he said these words, the wicked wolf sprang right at Little Red Riding Hood. Just at that moment Little Red Riding Hood's father was passing the cottage and heard her scream. He rushed in, and with one blow of his axe chopped off bad Mr. Wolf's head. Then he opened the closet and found grandmother safe and sound. Everybody was happy that Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother had escaped the bad wolf. Then Little Red Riding Hood's father took her home, and they lived happily ever after.